Okay, hello. So we are gonna get started on the Intro to Web Dev workshop for high school M&M. We are pretty limited on time for the Zoom meeting, so I'm just gonna rush through the presentation and try to go straight into the hands-on meeting. But yeah, if you're watching this recording, thank you for taking some time and to watch it. So quick table of contents. I'm just gonna go through what is web dev for anybody who doesn't know. I'm just gonna do a quick high overview of what is the internet. I'm not gonna get into like the nitty-gritty details of it, but just like I don't know, I didn't learn how the internet worked until I was pretty late into my career. So I'm also gonna cover the two sides of web dev. There's a lot more sides to it, but like the two main sides of it. I'm just gonna go over like some career paths you could get into if you were to I guess level up your skill in web dev. You don't necessarily need to become a web developer, but just know that the internet pretty much powers everything. Learning how to program for the internet, learning how to code for the internet, it honestly does translate into a lot of things. So just keep that in mind when you're I guess thinking about things. Um, College, is it necessary? Yes. At this point, yes. If you would have asked me this, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I'd have said probably not. But I'll just go over there's no slides for these last three, but it's just some thoughts to leave with y'all. But yeah, what I do differently and why web development. So, what do web developers do? Pretty much really simplified, we make the internet work. Not on a networking level, but on on a application layer level. Um, we are pretty much the ones that I guess code, like I mentioned earlier. The anything you see on the internet was probably made by a web developer. Um, and you're probably thinking, what's the difference between a web developer, a software engineer, and all of that good stuff? Essentially, a software developer can be a web developer. Not all web developers are software engineers. Or let me rethink that statement. If you're a software engineer, you can be a web developer. If you're a web developer, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a software engineer. Software engineering, software development, that just goes into how I guess the practices and the methodologies you approach to coding and developing your code. But um yeah, yeah. But just I'll skip that for now. Uh Essentially we create the websites that everyone else uses on a daily basis. And you're probably thinking, what do I need to get into web development? Not much, just the requirements, computer, some internet connection. But some soft requirements that you need are patience. You need a lot of patience. You need to learn how to code. You need to learn how to write readable, maintainable code. You need some creativity. You're not always going to have designers with you. So it's fun and I guess healthy to have some creativity in you. Because you can always on your free time make your own designs and turn those into little personal projects, and a caffeine addiction because you will be spending a lot of late nights. So that's what web developers do. But what is web development? Web development, it's a process of writing code for a website on the internet. It doesn't technically have to be a website, but most times it is. There's different kinds of websites, but there's things like static content, think like Wikipedia, blogs, portfolios. When I say static content, I mean the static is created already in the markup file. And your next question is probably what's a markup file? It's just like a file that you can write in HTML. I believe it's, yeah. HTML might stand for hypertext markup or markdown language. but it's data that you write onto an HTML file. And so it's already there. It's static, doesn't change, doesn't move. It's served like that from a server, which is essentially just a computer elsewhere over the internet to your computer. And so that's static content. Dynamic content, think like comments on a post and WordPress blogs, e-commerce. That is similar to static content, but instead the content is stored on a database. It's not stored in an HTML file. And when like you're visiting a website, usually the way it works is you'll get a file from a server that will contain the HTML. And this dynamic content, it will generate it will retrieve the content from a database and then just like inject it into its HTML. So kind of like templates. If you've heard of WordPress, I wouldn't recommend getting into it, but that's pretty much how WordPress works. It's just like a bunch of template files that just like retrieve data from a database. And there's web applications. So like that is similar to dynamic content, but it is completely unique to almost every user. So essentially just like things where you create an account and you have like personalized stuff on it. Gmail, YouTube, even Blackboard. Once you get into university, you'll probably be using Blackboard or Canvas or like, I don't know, other educational tools like that. But yeah, so two sides of web dev. Like I mentioned, there's way more sides, but this is just like simplified. And there's a front end development and there's back end development. Front end development is the pretty side of things. It's the front end. It's what users see when they visit a website. So when you get to youtube.com or whatever other website, if you're thinking of like mobile apps, if you get onto TikTok, the stuff you see is what front end developers coded up. It's like the way they position things on a page. It's how the web page feels to you. And it usually, these front end developers, they will be responsible for a lot of things, but like the main ones that they will mostly be responsible for is UI UX. If you don't know what UI UX is, it's user interface, user experience. It's just like exactly what I'm saying right now, like what the user sees, how they experience your application or like website or whatever. Responsive design is like how the application or the web page resizes as the screen changes. And state management, I won't get into it. There's a lot more technical stuff to that, but just know like front-end developers they're not just designers. There's a lot of logic and thinking to front-end development. For people who aren't too familiar with web development, they might just see front-end developers as like web designers, but um, as someone speaking from experience, there's a lot more to it. So back-end development, they focus on what's called business logic. It's more like server-side logic, and it's pretty much how the application thinks and delivers things. While like someone thinks that the front-end developer makes things look pretty, the same person might think that the backend developer is what makes the application work. And they are partially true, but they focus more on like the logic side of things as just to reiterate. Um, and then I didn't cover this for front end development because like if you're working in web dev, you pretty much have to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. For server side backend development, you can use almost any what's called server side programming languages. So there's the ones I have listed are PHP, Python, Java, Node.js, which is a server side runtime of JavaScript. I won't get into it, but there's that. There's also a bunch more. And honestly, it's like you pick your flavor pretty much. A lot of people don't like JavaScript. Very valid. So for those like who don't like JavaScript, backend development is a good way to go. And then some of the responsibilities include like the way the server or the cloud sort of handles your application and the logic, setting up and like maintaining the database, how it works, how it interacts with the front end. and API development. For anybody who doesn't know, API stands for Application Programming Interface. There's different kinds of APIs. In this instance, I am talking about web API. Um, and that's pretty much just what communicates or what helps the back end communicate with the front end. When the front end requests like some data, it's usually the API that's like handling that. It's not always, but most times it's going to be an API. Backend also handles like security. I just realized I misspelled that, but don't pay attention to that. The backend will usually like secure the API while the front end secures the front end or the client side application. And so like these responsibilities aren't external to that end of development. A lot of this does like go hand in hand with each other. Um, Honestly, back end and front end, they are, I guess, like interconnected up to a certain point. And they're so interconnected, and it's expected for like a lot of web developers to know all of this that full stack used to be known as if you were full stack, which just means you do front end and back end. Back in the day, full stack, you were recognized as a unicorn, basically. Like that was a company's dream for a developer to be full stack. Nowadays, it's pretty much expected for you to be full stack, which sucks because um, I guess the whole reasoning could be like, why pay two different people when you can pay one person to do two jobs? But yeah, that's just the way how things go, things progress as technology advances, all of that stuff. But yeah, no. So what can you get into as a web developer if you decide to like learn about web development? There's a lot of different career paths, but some of the main ones are full stack developer, like I mentioned. This is pretty much what you'll see nowadays. You won't really see much front end, back end only. For those positions, if you do want to like solely work on back end or like front end only, those usually fall more in line with software developers. Yeah, it depends on the company, really. A lot of these terms are used interchangeably, like software developer and software engineer. Companies will just use whatever sounds nice. If you want to like actually focus on a certain part of development or engineering, honestly, look at the job responsibilities and like the requirements. Usually that will give you a hint into what you'll do. They'll mention things like, oh, we want you to know uh web responsiveness, accessibility laws, and like stuff like that. So that will fall more for a front end. While if they're asking more for like database APIs and stuff like that, like I mentioned earlier, it will fall more in line with backend. But you don't necessarily have to be a code monkey if you do decide to go into web development. You can also be a designer, so UI UX. There's UI UX developer, but I also forgot to put on their UI UX designer. So those will like fall more in line with web design. And they'll work with tools such as Figma and like stuff like that. Um, as a web developer, it's good to know tools outside of coding, just because that not only levels you up, but it makes you more desirable for companies if you have like all these interchangeable skills that you should know if you were to become a full stack developer. But there's also like QA engineering, site reliability engineering. The SRE, pretty much what that does or what they focus on is just like making sure things in the infrastructure side of things. You don't have to know too much about that right now as a high schooler, but later on, like where you deploy your stuff and all of that, these SREs, they're the ones that like handle that and make sure this your applications and your business apps don't crash. But besides these, there's like so many more. Honestly, the tech field, it's ever growing, ever changing. There's probably going to be way more by the time you see this. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, and then so I took a little bit more time on that presentation than I wanted to, but I'm just before we move on into the hands-on, I'm just going to cover some things that you should know for what we're going to be doing for the project. We're going to be focusing more on like what a front-end developer might be doing. This is more very like foundational web development. We're just going to be covering HTML, CSS. You'll be using some JavaScript, but a lot of that was already pre-coded up by me. And you'll just be like, I guess like having the HTML access as JS instead of you yourself coding it because then I would have to explain what everything is. But yeah, so what's HTML? It's just pretty much what a file, I guess like what a file for a website has. And like this text that it has, it creates into web pages. I don't know. I don't there's a lot of very technicality side of things, but I'm just trying to keep it as general as possible. You don't need to worry too much about it. Just know that HTML is pretty much the text. If Let me phrase it this way. If a website was a person, the HTML would be like the skeleton, the CSS would be the skin, and the JavaScript would be the muscles. And pretty much what that means is just like HTML skeleton, bare bones, it's just text. CSS, the skin, it makes things look pretty. I'm not saying beauty is like skin deep, but yeah, you wouldn't want to see a skeleton walking around. So CSS stands for cascading style sheet. Um, like it says, it applies styles, colors, font shapes, and everything else. It's what makes it look nice. And oh, I forgot to add a JavaScript page to this, but JavaScript, it's the muscles. It's what makes things move, what makes things interact with one another. Without JavaScript, everything would just be very static, very two-dimensional, I guess. We wouldn't have things such as like nice buttons and like personal data and stuff like this. So yeah. And I will leave that for now. So let me, if you're watching this video, there hopefully will be a link attached to the repo. Uh, but let me pull up the repo that we will be grabbing for now for the hands-on project. And so for this, I'm going to do it in a way that I'm using Git, but if you don't have Git on your system, you can always just download this zip file, or I'll do that because I don't think a lot of people watching this would have Git. So if you go to code and then download the zip file, that should download the entire repository to your downloads like this. And all you need to do is just extract all. And that will open up a downloads folder for you, or that will open up a folder for you with the files that we need. And you could just open this in VS Code. How would I do this? It's not letting me show my window. Okay, so let's do this way. Uh, yeah, so if you have VS Code, just use that to open this folder up. Go to File. Oh, oh, I just realized I'm not sharing my entire screen. What about now? Okay, awesome. Sorry about that. Um, so yeah, if you open up VS Code, you could use File, Open Folder, and go to wherever your folder got downloaded to. For me, it's in my Downloads folder, and I'm going to open up the folder inside of the parent folder. I don't know why it saves like that, but yeah. And that should open up your what's called a repo, but I'll call it a project for y'all. And if you get lost or if for some reason you don't really know what's going on, I have this README here that you can always refer to. It looks not very friendly, but if you open preview or if you have some extension that will let you read what's called a markdown file. You can also like if you have VS Code, you could also download some extensions that will help you. Uh, this will take you pretty much step by step through what it is that we're going to be doing. Uh, and for anybody who is following along, I guess like one extension that I would recommend you have is Live Server. This will just make things a lot easier as you're developing. If you can see this, instead of opening up your file and then refreshing things every like 2 seconds, this live server just refreshes as you code. So, yeah. And just for sanity's sake, I will have my README open next to me as I'm going through this. But what is this? What am I looking at? So what you're looking at right now, or I should have told you, open index.html for to start. It's going to be inside your source folder. What am I looking at? You are looking at an HTML file. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is the skeleton of the website. You don't have to worry about what's going on in the head or what any of this does. That's honestly something you can learn about later. Just know that all of this like HTML tag, all of this is required to sort of show what is on this file on a web browser. And pretty much what this looks like as of right now, if I right click my index.html and go open with live server, that extension I mentioned earlier, uh, this should be it, I believe. Yeah. So there's nothing. Um, and that's we're just going to be adding things to it as we go along. And you can see I'll like switch back and forth so you can see what it is we're making. But yeah, I'm not going to read through this. I'm just going to like go add the things that I need to add. Let me see if you can actually, yeah, that would be better. Let's cool. All right. So yeah, I'm not going to read through all of this. This is more for like anybody who gets lost. But I'm just going to be following these steps. So what are we making? Pretty much. We are just going to be making like a quick little Pokédex. I get a lot of, I guess, like flack for a lot of my projects being Pokemon based. But essentially, or like really simply, Pokemon is a good starting theme for your projects because there's like so much data, so much, I guess, like love to it that developers have made public APIs to it, which is actually what we're going to be using, but later on. Uh, but yeah, this is going to be a Pokemon themed project. We're just going to make like a little like Pokédex that lets you look at the two-dimensional sprites, sprites being like the game art for these the original 151 Pokemon. But yeah, so let's start with making a tag, an HTML tag called a div. A div is just a container. And you won't see anything when you add a div, but let's add a class, and a class is going to be used to identify this HTML tag later on for our CSS styling. And we're just going to add, you can add whatever it is you want, but for this project, we're adding a card and template to it. And this is going to contain our, I'm calling it a card. It's going to contain the card of the Pokemon, which is going to have the Pokemon's entire data inside of it, and or its details. I call it in the document. But yeah, so inside this card, we're going to make another div with a class, or actually, no, sorry. Let me remove that. We're going to go straight into the details, and we're going to have a p tag, which stands for paragraph. This is going to cover all text. Each HTML tag has its own like specific uses for it. You don't need to know all of them. Just for now, all you need to know is like a div, a p tag, and an image tag. I see I used a section tag and an H, oh no, section tag and an H3 tag down here. This is just to show you how like things can work all together. A section tag, it's honestly just a div tag, but it's for like accessibility reasons. You don't need to know about that. But H3, again, accessibility, but normally H3 will have like a bigger, I guess, like font size and boldness to it than a default P tag. But these can all be changed with CSS. But yeah, that's long story short, you just need to know these like four tags for this one project. But yeah, just know there's a lot more out there. So in this P tag or this paragraph tag, it's going to have a class of Pokédex number. And if you know Pokemon, you know that's sort of like the ID of a Pokemon. The Pokédex is sort of like its in-universe database of all the Pokemon in the world. And if you noticed in this, like in the container class, I called it template. It's because we are not going to be making 151 cards in this HTML file. That would be crazy. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using an API that the developer community have made and made free for everyone in the internet. And so we're just going to be making a template that we'll be basing all the other cards off of. And once we call in the data, we're just going to like overwrite this template and sort of like dynamically input this data. A lot of cool stuff. For right now, that probably sounds like gibberish to you, but just know as a beginner project, this is a really good project for like people getting into web development. It's a super powerful personal project to have on your resume as well. Um, so yeah, going into this, we're going to have a section that I will give it a class of images. Uh, make sure we're good on time. Uh, and inside the section, we are going to give it, inside the section, we're going to give it a uh, class, yeah, a class of, I'll call it a sprite font. And this image tag, you can see it takes different, what's called attributes as compared to the tags that we wrote earlier. But just know that the alt stands for alternative. I think it might be like text or alternative. Yeah, alternative text. It just means what will be shown in case this image that we're going to be loading in doesn't work. Source, we are going to take the URL from the example code that I'm giving you in the markdown file. And it looks like I am missing the closing tag for my image. And so that's probably a good thing, something I should mention. Every tag is going to have an opening tag and a closing tag, whether it's a pair, so like the way you see in sections, or a solo closing tag, which is how you see in the image tag. Essentially, everything you open up, you need to close. Just to keep that in mind in case you start seeing like weird syntax highlighting the same way that's going on here. Um, how this like section turns white when I leave something open. But yeah, and then for this, I'm just going to like save some time and copy this tag. It's pretty much just the same image tag that we just wrote. But instead of sprite front, it's sprite back. And the source, it's a different image. It just has the back source to it. So what does this look like right now? Like that. Remember when I say that HTML is a skeleton? It does not look good. Yep. So, but this just means that like things are working. So this image, it's coming in dynamically, or not dynamically, but we don't have an image file saved to our files that we're just like calling. we're actually calling this image over the internet using the API already. But yeah, and this isn't using the API directly. This is just using the image files that the API has stored. But just know we're already using the API. And then we're going to have an element of, I'll give it a class name of name. And for this one, it is for this element, H3, same like the P tags and section tags, it is going to be a paired tag. And here for our template, we're going to use Bulbasaur. You'll probably see my code move a lot. It's just that muscle memory. I like to format my code after almost every line, so things like shift. Um, if you see that happen a lot, it's not that I'm adding or removing anything. I'm just like formatting my code so it looks nicer to me, and so that way I can like find myself more easier. But if you get lost after I do this, just know like nothing changed. And then we will add a p tag of class name type, and this is Bulbasaur is a grass type. And so how does that look so far? And that's what we have so far for the template. And honestly, this is almost everything that we'll be needing for the HTML side of things. We might add like one or two more things later, but the main, I guess, content, this is it. This is what HTML looks like without CSS, without JavaScript, and all that good stuff. And yeah, that's the template that I have for the card. And then time is running out for this recording. We'll be starting a new recording soon. But I guess like for this, I'll just ex in with the time I have left, I'll explain more. I know I kind of sort of rushed through that, but I'll explain more of the HTML, of what's going on and what you can do to like, I guess, see how your changes affect things on the front end side of things. And then in the next recording, we'll move on into the CSS and we'll make this not look ugly. But yeah, so let's focus on the HTML file. And just a quick overview, or like just a quick recap of what we did. We created a container that is going to be containing our Pokemon details. And one way you can see when you are writing HTML, if you go into your browser, you right click and I'm using Firefox. For me, it's inspect. It might be different depending on like what browser you're doing, but you can actually see the HTML that you're writing up here. So everything is, you will see the HTML tags in the inspector, and it's pretty much what I was explaining as we were writing this card or template class. It's containing everything inside or all the Pokemon details. And then here, uh, you can see our like ID or Pokemon or Pokédex number is stored here. Inside the section, you have the images, the two images, and you can actually open this tag up and see like the details, the attributes, and if you hover, or for Firefox at least, if you hover over the source, you can see what image it is. And so as a web developer, this you need to get comfortable learning how to use the inspector. It just honestly makes what's called debugging a lot easier. Debugging just means like finding bugs in your code and removing them. But yeah, that is it. And this is the HTML side of things. Once we get to CSS, if you are curious, you can also look into the CSS side of things. That will be found under rules if you're in Firefox. But this is just like some predefined rules I have that are is already being used in your HTML file. That's being loaded in the head. So everything I have, you should have if you've been following up to now. But we'll be stopping this recording and then we'll be moving on into the next part for CSS student. So